Hey, welcome to today's webinar on monounsaturated fat, healthier oils for healthier business. My name is David Disiak, and I'm the commercial leader for grains and oils for Dow AgroSciences here in North America. I've been working with Dow AgroSciences for over 32 years, and I've been involved in our Healthy Oils program for over 15 years, and I'd like to welcome you to today's program. I'll provide an overview of omega-9 oils, where they came from and how we produce them. We'll take a look at healthy oils and the use in the food industry today. We're lucky to have with us also Dr. Leah Gillingham. She's a leading researcher in the area of monounsaturated fats, and she'll talk about their health benefits. We're also fortunate to have Dr. Peter Jones from the University of Manitoba. He's the head of the Richardson Center for Nutrition and Food, and he's got some great new exciting findings on the health benefits of monounsaturated fats. Then we'll connect health and functionality, and that will bring then an end to our webinar. First, I'd like to introduce Dow AgroSciences for those of you who aren't familiar with us. We're the agricultural sciences business of Dow Chemical. Our headquarters are in Indianapolis, Indiana. We are a research-based, technology-driven company. We're a large company with over $6 billion in sales, but we spend over 10% of our sales in R&D, so research is at the heart of our business. Our Healthy Oils program is a key part of our global growth platform. So we're a company that really helps create tools that farmers can use to improve their crop production and crop protection, but a large part of our growing business is based around seeds and plant genetics. And so being able to create new traits with new functionality is an important part of our growth program. Our Healthy Oils program is a key part of our strategy within Dow AgroSciences. Our oils program is really based around two key crops, canola and sunflower. We have a large focus on breeding high-yielding, widely adapted healthy oil varieties that farmers can grow cost-effectively across a variety of countries and a variety of cropping environments. We also have a lot of experience with this. We have a proven field production program with more than 10 years of experience in supplying healthy oils to the North American food industry. Omega-9 oils come from our canola and sunflower seeds. They are a leading solution today for helping food companies remove trans fats and for developing healthier foods. These oils are unique in that they're high in heart-healthy monounsaturated fats and uniquely very low in saturated fat. And they've been widely adopted across the North American food industry as companies migrated away from trans fats and are seeking solutions to oils that have lower amounts of saturated fat. Omega-9 canola oil has become a leading solution to helping food companies get trans and saturated fats out of their products. They've been widely adopted by the food service industry and are being widely adopted by the packaged goods industry. We developed this oil by using traditional plant breeding. By changing the ratio of the fatty acids within the oil of canola, we can change the functionality of that product. In fact, it's been so widely adopted that in 2013, omega-9 canola oil will represent over 40% of the total canola oils consumed by the U.S. food industry. And again, this oil has a very unique profile. It's very high in monounsaturated fats, around the 74% level, and also very low in saturated fat, less than 7% saturated fats. And so this oil has a key set of attributes around health, around functionality, and around the cost effectiveness. In fact, we take a look at the omega-9 profile coming out of canola as maybe having the optimum profile. And we talk about that in this fashion. So we can see in this chart, we've got comparisons among omega-9 canola oil, commodity canola oil, palm oil, soybean oil, and partially hydrogenated soybean oil. A number of years ago, of course, hydrogenated soybean oil was ubiquitous across our food supply. And over two-thirds of all soybean oil, which is the leading oil used, was hydrogenated in some form. And as trans fat labeling came, we had to find an alternative to that oil. We needed to get the trans fats out of the diet, but also then needed something that was functional and delivered on these important attributes. So this oil is unique in that it is very heart healthy. They're high in good fats, they have the lowest in saturated fat, and they have zero trans fat. They're naturally stable. We can replace the functionality of hydrogenation through this new fatty acid profile by increasing the oleic or the omega-9 content and then decreasing the linolenic level. We have an oil that gives longer fry life and longer shelf life. It doesn't require additives to help stabilize it, or it doesn't require hydrogenation. Also, this oil, because of the uniqueness of the fatty acid profile, delivers a clean, light flavor. The fatty acid profile isn't dominated by any one element per se, and it has enough polyunsaturates to deliver good deep fried flavor in that kind of an application, but also deliver good stability, and of course the high monos deliver very good health. In a variety of sensory tests over the years, we've got many experiences through these trials that demonstrate how consumers actually prefer the taste of omega-9 oils with other commonly used options by the food industry. And as I said before, this oil has become one of the leading solutions for the food industry to get rid of trats and get rid of saturates. So you can see in this chart a number of leading concepts across the North American food industry have adopted omega-9 as their primary oil. We're fortunate today to have Dr. Peter Jones, who's the head of the Richardson Center at the University of Manitoba around functional foods and health, and Dr. Leah Gillingham, who's a leading researcher in monounsaturated fats. Leah will now provide an overview of some of the work that has been done in the area of monounsaturated fats and their health benefits.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and I want to thank Dow AgroSciences actually for sponsoring this presentation and Fleischmann Hillard for organizing the event. So over the next 15 minutes, I hope to enlighten you on the scientific research supporting monounsaturated fatty acids, or MUFAs, for heart health, as well as the importance of replacement of saturated and trans fat in the current diet with monounsaturated fatty acids. It is well known that cardiovascular disease in North America reflects unhealthy lifestyle choices, namely poor or atherogenic diets, lack of physical activity, as well as smoking. Metabolic syndrome is a combination of metabolic disorders, which are shown here in the green boxes, which include increased abdominal or belly fat, high blood glucose levels associated with insulin resistance and diabetes risk, dyslipidemia, namely high bad LDL cholesterol and triglyceride levels, and low good HDL cholesterol levels, as well as elevated blood pressure, also known as hypertension. In time, endothelial dysfunction may occur, leading to inflammation and thrombosis, all culminating to increased risk of developing cardiovascular disease morbidity and ultimately death. Currently, 1 in 3 Americans and 1 in 5 Canadians have metabolic syndrome, with an estimated 80 million Americans and 1.6 million Canadians affected by cardiovascular disease. However, while this may all seem very overwhelming, there are elements within our control, as studies show that as much as 60% of cardiovascular events can be prevented by incorporating healthy lifestyle choices, including exercise, abstaining from smoking, and eating a healthy diet. So monounsaturated fatty acids are part of a healthy diet. Also known as omega-9 fatty acids, MUFAs offer valuable health benefits protecting against metabolic syndrome and cardiovascular disease. In considering the 2010 dietary guidelines for Americans and their list of foods to reduce and foods to increase in the average Western diet, I would like to highlight that several points specifically emphasize the role of dietary fat. In the foods to reduce section, the dietary guidelines specifically recommend replacing saturated fat in the diet with monounsaturated fat and polyunsaturated fat. That trans fat intake needs to be as low as possible by limiting hydrogenated and solid fat sources in the diet. And with the recommendations to reduce calories from solid fats and added sugars, we see that in the foods to increase section, it is recommended to increase oils in the diet, specifically as a replacement for solid fats. Therefore, there are several potential targets for where incorporation of monounsaturated fats in the diet can assist in meeting these dietary guidelines. So what are monounsaturated fatty acids? Well, MUFAs, again, also referred to omega-9 fats, are fatty acid chains with one cis double bond at the 9th carbon, which gives the structure a bend in the chain. The major MUFA in the diet is oleic acid, which is shown here, and it's rich in foods like canola oil, olive oil, nuts, and avocados. Monounsaturated fats have a higher melting point than polyunsaturated fats and are liquid at room temperature. Conversely, polyunsaturated fatty acids, which encompass both omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, have 2 or more double bonds in the fatty acid chain and are also liquid at room temperature. Saturated fats contain no double bonds, hence the straight structure of stearic acid, which is shown here, and are solid at room temperature. While trans fat, produced during chemical hydrogenation of vegetable oils, have their one double bond in the trans configuration, making the structure very rigid, which causes several detrimental effects to our cellular membranes once these trans fats are consumed. Oleic acid is the major trans fat in the diet, and it has been emphasized in dietary guidelines that its consumption needs to be avoided. So all in all, considering good fats versus bad fats in the diet, monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats are classified as good fats, while saturated fats and trans fats are termed bad fats. When looking at the fatty acid profile of dietary oils, omega-9 canola oil, conventional canola oil, omega-9 sunflower oil, and olive oil are our richest sources of monounsaturated fats, which are shown here in yellow. However, as compared, canola oil and omega-9 canola oil have the lowest saturated fat content, shown in red, which is about half the saturated fat content of olive oil. In addition, second to flaxseed oil, canola oil has the highest omega-3 content, which is indicated by the green bars. Currently, due to the very high saturated fat content of lard, palm, butter, as well as coconut oil, and the very high trans fat content of partially hydrogenated soybean oil, shown in the black bar, the 2010 Dietary Guidelines for Americans classifies these fats as solid fats and recommends that they should be isocalorically replaced in the American diet with oils that are high in unsaturated fats, namely monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fatty acids. Now, if we consider recommended versus current intakes of fatty acids in the population, our current total fat intake is actually in line with recommendations from the American Dietetic Association as well as Dietitians of Canada. However, the issue is that our saturated fat and trans fat intakes remain in excess of recommendations, as it's recommended that total saturated fat intakes be below 10% of energy for the average population. However, for people with cardiovascular disease risk, their total saturated fat intakes needs to be even lower at 7% of energy. In addition, it's recommended that trans fat consumption be as low as possible by limiting solid fats in foods containing partially hydrogenated vegetable oils. So where do we have room for movement? Well, MUFAs actually give us the most flexibility, as guidelines allow for up to 25% of energy to be from monounsaturated fatty acids. And we are currently only consuming about half that at 12% of energy. With respect to polyunsaturated fat, current recommendations cap total PUFAs at 10% of daily calories, and we're already approaching that at current intakes at 7% of energy. So if we consider dietary intervention strategies, I really want to emphasize that only a 5% substitution of saturated fats in the Western diet with monounsaturated fats can lead to an absolute change in population intake, beneficially reducing current intakes of saturated fatty acids, taking it from the red category to the green category to about 6% of energy. Furthermore, we see an associated reduction in trans fat, while MUFA intakes still remain within recommendations at 17% of energy. So the issue really surrounding excessive saturated fat and trans fat intakes is really linked to the intake of solid fats at about 19% of calories in the average American diet. And guidelines really recommend that these need to be reduced to 5 to 15% of calories, not only from solid fats, but combined with sugar. Therefore, we can actually target these recommendations very easily through the use of MUFA-rich, also known as omega-9 oils, as a substitute for solid fats in the American diet. Observational studies favor the cardioprotective effects of dietary monounsaturated fatty acids, and a recent review published in the Archives of Internal Medicine investigated the evidence supporting a link between dietary factors and coronary heart disease. In the assessment of nearly 600 studies, which included both prospective cohort studies and randomized control trials, monounsaturated fatty acids were the only fatty acid that had a strong inverse association with coronary heart disease, as the authors reported a 20% reduction in coronary heart disease events with consumption of monounsaturated fats. In addition, questions still remain as to the optimal replacement of saturated fats in the diet. Should it be with either polyunsaturated fats, monounsaturated fats, or carbohydrates? Well, considering the evidence from prospective cohort studies, in this 14-year follow-up of over 80,000 women from the Nurses' Health Study, a 5% increase in energy intake from MUFAs was associated with a reduction in coronary heart disease risk by 19%. Furthermore, it was estimated that only a 5% energy replacement of saturated fats with monounsaturated fats could reduce risk of coronary heart disease by up to 30%. A 2% energy replacement of trans fat with MUFAs decreased coronary heart disease risk by 50%. And on the other hand, we see that a 5% replacement of MUFAs with carbohydrates actually leads to an increase in coronary heart disease by about 20%. So from these results, Hu and colleagues concluded that replacing saturated fats and trans fats with MUFAs or PUFAs is actually more effective in preventing coronary heart disease than reducing total fat intake. So what are the metabolic benefits of dietary monounsaturated fats that specifically target a reduction in cardiovascular disease? Well, research suggests a reduction in blood cholesterol and triglyceride levels, a decrease in body weight and fat mass, specifically in the abdominal or belly region, an increase in insulin sensitivity and thus a decrease in type 2 diabetes, beneficial reductions in blood pressure, as well as a decrease in endothelial dysfunction, which is associated with inflammation and atherosclerosis. Due to the substantial clinical evidence on the cardioprotective effects of unsaturated fatty acids, in 2002, the Institute of Medicine authorized a specific statement stating that monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fatty acids reduce blood cholesterol concentrations and help lower the risk of heart disease when they specifically replace saturated fats in the diet. Now, this statement by the Institute of Medicine is of value because according to the National Cholesterol Education Program, elevated LDL cholesterol remains the primary modifiable risk factor for coronary heart disease and a major focus of dietary intervention strategies. In fact, studies have demonstrated that for every 1% reduction in LDL cholesterol concentrations, there is a 1% reduction in coronary heart disease risk. And if we reduce LDL cholesterol by 1.8 millimoles per liter, we can actually lead to a reduction in total coronary heart disease risk by about 60%. Therefore, if we consider a 5% isocaloric replacement of saturated fats in the diet with monounsaturated fats, in as little as 3 to 4 weeks, there's an absolute reduction in LDL cholesterol by 0.2 millimoles per liter, which is associated with an estimated 7% reduction in coronary heart disease risk. If we take a closer look at the effects of dietary fatty acids on cholesterol levels, in this pivotal meta-analysis of 60 randomized control trials, replacement of carbohydrates in the diet with monos or polys actually resulted in a decrease in LDL cholesterol levels, whereas trans fat and saturated fat replacement led to a substantial increase in LDL cholesterol. And from the study that I conducted a couple years ago at the Richardson Center in 36 hypercholesterolemic subjects who specifically consumed a high MUFA-rich diet due to incorporation of high oleic canola oil diet, as compared to the Western diet, we saw a reduction in LDL cholesterol by 12% and total cholesterol by 7%. So the incorporation of high oleic canola oil was specifically beneficial with respect to blood lipids. With respect to effects on HDL cholesterol, our good cholesterol, studies consistently show that carbohydrates have a detrimental effect on HDL cholesterol. Therefore, replacement of carbohydrates with either saturated fats, monos, or polys actually leads to a beneficial increase in HDL cholesterol levels. On the contrary, it is continually reported that consumption of trans fat leads to an unfavorable reduction in HDL cholesterol levels. Therefore, if we look at the overall effects on the total to HDL cholesterol ratio, which includes changes in LDL cholesterol, triglycerides, and HDL cholesterol, because MUFAs and PUFAs lead to a substantial decrease in LDL cholesterol levels, we see that the most beneficial reduction in the total to HDL cholesterol ratio with consumption of MUFAs and PUFAs as compared with carbohydrates is affected, whereas consumption of saturated fat leads to a detrimental increase in this ratio, and trans fat consumption has the most deleterious effects, significantly raising this ratio. These effects on the total to HDL cholesterol ratio are of great importance, as some professionals now consider the ratio to be a more specific marker of coronary heart disease risk than looking at the effects on only one cholesterol measure. The effects of monounsaturated fats, on body composition is actually now gaining much attention and has valuable health implications because increases in body fat and fat mass has been highlighted to be the underlying cause of dyslipidemia as well as insulin resistance, blood pressure, and ultimately metabolic syndrome. So in this recent meta-analysis comparing long-term intakes of high MUFA diets versus low MUFA diets on body composition, the study concluded that consuming high MUFA diets for at least 6 months resulted in a significant reduction in body weight by 1.7 kilograms, as well as a reduction in body fat mass by about 2 kilograms. In addition, we also know that an increase in abdominal fat or belly fat, which is actually quite common in men, is associated with an increase in cardiovascular events. So in 2007, these researchers published the results from a randomized controlled crossover study in people with insulin resistance. And what they found after only 28 days was that the MUFA-rich diet prevented central body fat distribution or belly fat, whereas after consumption of the carbohydrate-rich diet, subject's fat mass was actually redistributed from the periphery to the abdomen or belly, which is unfavorable. Furthermore, compared to the MUFA-rich diet, the carb-rich diet decreased postprandial adiponectin levels and insulin sensitivity, ultimately associated with an increased risk of type 2 diabetes. Therefore, MUFA-rich diets have a more favorable effect on body fat distribution, particularly by preventing abdominal fat accumulation. Now, turning to the effects on insulin sensitivity and glucose metabolism is improved when carbohydrates, saturated fats, and trans fats are specifically replaced in the diet with monounsaturated fats. In the Can-Wu study of healthy men and women, they actually saw that at total fat intakes below 37% of energy, shown on the right, consumption of MUFA-rich diets for 3 months improved insulin sensitivity by about 9%, whereas the saturated fat-rich diet decreased insulin sensitivity by about 13%. Therefore, the beneficial effects of dietary MUFAs on insulin sensitivity and glucose metabolism have very important implications in the reduction of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular risk. Considering the effects of monounsaturated fats on blood pressure, this meta-analysis, published in the Annals of Nutrition and Metabolism on long-term intervention trials, investigated the effects on systolic and diastolic blood pressure when high MUFA diets were compared with low MUFA diets. And the weighted mean actually reported a favorable reduction in systolic blood pressure by 2.26 millimeter mercury and a reduction in diastolic blood pressure by 1.15 millimeter mercury with the high MUFA diet as compared with low MUFA diets. So looking at the totality of the evidence, and from the review that we published in the journal Lipids, monounsaturated fats can lead to the prevention of metabolic syndrome and ultimately cardiovascular disease risk by favorably targeting several metabolic factors, including blood lipids, body composition, blood pressure, glucose, and insulin sensitivity. And the values for each disorder that are shown here in the blue boxes are the metabolic targets outlined by professional health associations like the American Heart Association. Therefore, if we can actually substitute saturated fats and trans fat sources in our diet with monounsaturated fats, we can better help our population achieve recommended metabolic targets outlined here and ultimately reduce cardiovascular disease risk in our country. So how do we communicate the health benefits of incorporating monounsaturated fats into our foods? Well, primarily this is done through the use of health claims on food package labels. With respect to U.S. food claims or health claims, based on the superior nutritional profile of canola oil and evidence from clinical studies specifically on canola oil, in 2006 the FDA authorized a qualified health claim for canola oil. Now, foods that contain canola oil can state on their packaging that eating about 1.5 tablespoons of canola oil daily may reduce the risk of coronary heart disease due to the unsaturated fat content in canola oil, and again, highlighting the importance of replacing a similar amount of saturated fat with monounsaturated fats and not increasing the total amount of calories consumed in a day. Similarly, Canada has just authorized a health claim for the labeling of MUFA and PUFA-rich vegetable oils and foods that contain these oils. So if foods comply with the list of conditions shown in black below, they can actually state on their packaging that replacing saturated fats with polyunsaturated fats and monounsaturated fats from vegetable oils helps lower cholesterol, as cholesterol, high cholesterol, is a risk factor for heart disease. So in summary, I would like to emphasize and go back to the first slide that the prevalence of cardiovascular disease in North America can indeed be modified through dietary changes in fat quality. More specifically, if we can increase the use of monounsaturated fats, particularly as a substitute for fats or oils rich in trans and saturated fats, we can effectively not only target dietary recommendations, we can target a reduction in risk factors for cardiovascular disease and ultimately improve the health and the wellness of our population. And with this, I'd like to thank you and pass it on to Dr. Peter Jones.
Thank you, Leah. It's Peter Jones here. It's my pleasure and privilege to have this opportunity to present today. My purpose today is to describe to you the findings of the canola oil multi-center intervention trial. I think Leah gave a fantastic background in bringing us up to speed in terms of health benefits of monounsaturated fats. My first slide shows that we have basically seen quite a sizable shift in the pattern of fat consumption as we've morphed from an agricultural to an industrial society, and particularly up to the year 2000, we understand we have to do something about this increased saturated fat intake. The big question mark is, what do we replace saturates with? A study that's just very recently come out took a look at primary endpoints in terms of acute myocardial infarction, stroke, or death from cardiovascular causes. The pre-Diamet study actually looked at Mediterranean diets, either supplemented with nuts or virgin olive oil, and found a sizable reduction in incidence of cardiovascular endpoints in either of those Mediterranean diets, particularly pointing at monounsaturated fats contained in those sorts of diets. We have also seen the data from this trial. I bring it up again because I think it underpins this new aspect of consuming monos, that is, it goes beyond just lipid modulation, but we also have seen provocative shifts in particularly body fat and body fat distribution compared with other diets when we consume monos. And in fact, Dr. Gillingham's PhD work pointed at a strong trend towards a reduced android to gynoid fat mass ratio in a diet rich in high stability or high oleic canola oil compared to a Western diet or a diet rich in flaxseed canola oil in terms of a blend. So we've got a lot of provocative evidence that we're not only improving hard endpoints for cardiovascular disease risk, but also mechanistically altering blood lipids as well as body composition. This is particularly relevant as metabolic syndrome prevalence continues to increase, and very disturbingly among children. And so if we can harness the power, if you will, of MUFA to address both lipids and central obesity and reduce metabolic syndrome risk factors, we're definitely stepping ahead in the right direction. So with that as a preamble, I want to turn our attention to some of the data which have just recently been released at the American Heart Association meetings, as well as American Oil Chemists and Experimental Biology, which is a study termed COMET. And the overall purpose shown here was that modification of dietary fatty acid quality towards optimization of the N6, N9, and N3 in terms of short and long chain profiles by inclusion of novel oil blends will benefit cardiovascular risk factors. This study was a collaboration bringing together the expertise across 4 different clinical trial centers. And you can see the principal investigators and their team members listed here at University of Manitoba, Penn State, University of Laval, and University of Toronto. And the funding for this project was provided by Dow AgroSciences, Canola Council of Canada, as well as Flax Council of Canada. This was a major adventure with a whole series of different objectives. These are presented in this slide, so as well as plasma lipids, lipoprotein subclasses, as well as inflammatory cytokines. We were also interested in a variety of other measures. We looked at endothelial function. We are still looking at some other parameters. We're certainly interested in looking at body composition using DEXA. We're still examining the efficiency of conversion of short-chain omega-3s to EPA and DHA. We're looking at how the gene expression ties in with that process, and we're also looking at SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, that is genetic variance in terms of that conversion rate of ALA to EPA DHA. And in fact, this study is turning into somewhat of a legacy trial in that we're now building out on examining some other things such as reverse cholesterol transport as well as fatty acid esterification. So by collecting additional samples, we've had a chance to go and explore further endpoints. This is really the core of the COMET trial. And in order to examine the effect of varying fatty acid composition on CVD risk markers, 5 diet oil blends were selected. These were given to human volunteers as part of a base diet, which was given at levels isocaloric with calculated energy requirements, with fat providing 35% of energy per day and approximately 2/3 of the fat energy replaced by one of these 5 oil blends, if you will. So we had canola, high oleic or stability canola, the high stability canola with added DHA, and then we also had a corn safflower blend and a flax safflower blend. And you can see the fatty acid profiling here to the right in this slide. The saturated fatty acid pattern was pretty much consistent across these oils, but that's where things started to change. Once we go beyond that, you can see that the high oleic diets were all rich in monounsaturates, and the corn safflower, flax safflower rich in PUFAs. And then we could also build out and look at the omega-3 content being high in the flax safflower in terms of alpha-linolenic or docosahexaenoic acid. DHA was elevated, of course, in the high oleic canola plus DHA. So through this blend, we were able to capture a whole variety of different fatty acid profilings, which were central to the main hypothesis. Each of these 5 diets was fed over a 1-month period in a double-blind crossover controlled feeding trial, so fully randomized with a, importantly, 4-week washout period. In some instances at Penn State, we shortened that, but the majority of volunteers had 4 weeks. And these diets were prepared as pre-made foods in a metabolic kitchen and given to individuals with 1 meal under supervision, other meals prepared for takeout. So I first want to look at to concentrate on the 3 canola diets, because that's where we had an initial interest, and then also take a look at all 5 diets in a subsequent examination on body composition. It's also important to note that the way we were able to add the fats and fat blends to the diet was as multi-flavored smoothies or shakes, and so volunteers tolerated these very easily, and they were provided under supervision so that we were sure that volunteers were consuming these oils so that there was no compliance issue. In terms of who we studied, we looked at individuals who had metabolic syndrome based on the International Diabetes Federation definitions. So that was heightened waist circumference plus 1 of the following metabolic syndrome risk factors, including high glucose, low HDL, high triglycerides, or abnormally elevated blood pressure. And our age range was from 20 to 65 years, and BMIs from 22 to 40 kilograms per meter square. 3 of the 4 studies participated in the clinical trial. 3 of the 4 centers, So the Richardson Center here at University of Manitoba, INAF, Institute for Nutraceutique et Aliments Fonctionnels at Laval, as well as Penn State, all enrolled a total of 170 volunteers. There were 40 dropouts over this very demanding 9-month intervention period, that is 5 months of feeding, each month interspersed by a 4-month washout period when volunteers went back to consuming their average North American diets. So we had 130 individuals complete overall. You can see the baseline characteristics here, and essentially across the 3 participating centers, we saw similarities across the anthropometric and serum level measurements, with perhaps the exception of HDL, where the Penn State values appear to be lower. I want to provide you with lipid results for the 3 canola oil phases. The plasma lipids were analyzed and averaged for days 1 and 2, and also averaged across days 29 and 30 to try and remove some of the variability that we habitually see in this parameter. So we measured total cholesterol, LDL, HDL, triglycerides, and apolipoproteins, and I'll show you the cholesterol and triglyceride data. So this is the central lipid level slide for COMET, and this shows lipid parameters across the canola treatments for the N. So, N of 130. So what we saw here was actually statistically significant declines in total cholesterol and LDL across all 3 canola phases. So canola shown in blue, the canola DHA shown in the brown, and the high stability canola shown in green. And in fact, these declines are from baseline are not dissimilar from what Dr. Gillingham just mentioned, her declines being 12% and 7% for LDL in total. So these were statistically significant and reflect the benefit of these canola oils against the baseline diet. Where things start to differ is when you take a look at the canola DHA. You see it manifesting some of the beneficial effects that we know are associated with fish oil feeding and high DHA. That is, the HDL level actually increased significantly despite an LDL decline. And in fact, in some instances, you see fish oils increase LDL. The presence of the canola likely was responsible for the continued persistent decrease in LDL, which if you take a look right over on the second last and third last panels, particularly total cholesterol to HDL ratio, produced the most favorable beneficial impact on TC to HDL ratio. The other well-known feature of feeding long-chain omega-3s is their ability to reduce triglyceride levels substantially, and that's what we saw in COMET. We saw, in fact, a 20% decline in triglycerides shown for the canola DHA, and we saw that only for that one oil, and that translated into a very beneficial impact on triglyceride to HDL ratio shown on the far right bar. So overall, all 3 canola-containing diets yielded very beneficial effects with perhaps augmentation with the canola DHA. Data that we just generated over the last couple of weeks, and we had a chance to present at ALCS, are provided here for diastolic blood pressure at baseline and endpoint of each of the 3 canola oil diet phases. And here you can see that there is a tendency across all canola groups to result in a decline in both diastolic and systolic blood pressure, but a statistically significant decrease occurred in the canola DHA group, not inconsistent with previous results with DHA-containing diets. So it appeared as though the canola DHA resulted in a modest but statistically significant decrease in blood pressure. And that is shown here in terms of the actual degree of change. So a percent change, about 4% for the canola DHA. And actually, when expressed as percent change, we saw statistically significant improvements or decreases in both systolic and diastolic for the canola and high stability canola diets as well. So consistent with what Dr. Gillingham had indicated for blood pressure, we saw improvement in all 3 canola oil diets. Recently, it's been popular to express risk in terms of the Framingham 10-year coronary heart disease risk score, which is an algorithm which imputes parameters including age, total cholesterol, high-density lipoprotein cholesterol, as well as systolic blood pressure and gender. And so we had all these data available across our COMET diets and endpoints. And so we took a look at this for the 3 canola oil diets. And the data are shown here. So this is the 10-year coronary heart disease risk score for canola DHA, and canola oleic. And you can see that, as you might glean from the lipid level changes as well as blood pressure, we did see a statistically significant decrease across all 3 diets when we compare the number generator before versus after. And I think what's important here is when you take a look at the canola DHA, because of the improvements in blood pressure, because of particularly the HDL and LDL shifts being more favorable, in fact, the canola DHA stood out as having a more pronounced effect on the Framingham 10-year risk score, and in fact decreased it by larger than a whole basis point. So very, I think, substantial improvement in risk score with the diet high in canola DHA. I want to also just go to the body composition data in this study, and here I want to take a look at all 5 diet interventions. We measured body composition using a well-accepted technique, the dual X-ray absorptiometry whole body scan, and we're able to use computer algorithms to part out where fat is existing, so we're able to look at arm, leg, trunk, head, android, and gynoid regions particularly. So DEXA was performed at the beginning of the study and the end of each diet period in all volunteers, and basically what we were able to demonstrate here is that there was a body composition response to feeding the 5 different diet interventions. And I just draw your attention when we calculate the data out, examining android to gynoid fat mass ratio shown on the bottom panel here, you can see that the high oleic canola oil, although the ratio was not in terms of net value much different from that of the flax safflower, this was approaching statistical significance with a p-value of 0.06. When we take a look at the actual android fat mass at the end of each of these dietary periods, this is where, for us, this was really a very exciting finding. It also reflects the fact that we have the power with the crossover design study as well as the N of 130 to be able to discern extremely subtle changes in body fat mass. And what we're able to show here is reduced android fat or abdominal fat or belly fat in terms of both canola oil diets. The canola oil shown on the left as well as the high oleic canola shown second across compared to the flax safflower. So consistent with the strong trend in the ratio that we discovered, we actually were able to show statistically significant decreases in android fat mass. And we have, if you will, pressure tested this finding a variety of ways with our colleagues, Dr. West and Dr. Penny Chris-Etherton at Penn State, and we find these are sustainable results, and we're actually very excited and looking for the mechanisms behind this. And it's not inconsistent with the findings of some of the other approaches and meta-analysis, and consistent with this notion that MUFA-rich oils really are capable of reducing android fat mass. So I'm going to conclude with the following findings. All 3 canola oil-containing diets that we tested resulted in improved lipid level profiles as well as Framingham risk score values. The diet with the DHA-rich canola resulted in better overall lipid lowering and a more favorable Framingham 10-year coronary heart disease risk score due to the larger impact on triglyceride levels, likely as well as blood pressure. And as well, our findings have shown that both the regular and high-stability canola oils improve fat distribution, particularly reducing android fat mass compared with the flax safflower oil blend. So in sum total then, canola oil, either as a high-stability or with added DHA, or in its native form, appears to be a desirable option for replacement of saturated fat to optimize cardiovascular disease risk in susceptible individuals. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Peter. We would now like to take a look at connecting health and functionality from the consumer perspective. Consumers are getting a much better understanding of the difference between good fats and bad fats in their diet. New research also shows that there is a much better and deeper understanding by consumers of the role of healthy fats in their diet. There is a good understanding or good comprehension that healthy fats can help reduce heart disease and heart disease risk factors, The healthy fats can help reduce cholesterol, can reduce heart disease incidence, and help reduce blood pressure. There are also many other benefits around healthy oils that consumers do attribute, but the elements tied to cardiovascular health are probably the most prevalent. This study from Gallup in 2012 of consumers and their understanding of healthy oils also shed some interesting perspective. At the top of the list, we have olive and omega-3 oils as being perceived as the most healthiest, but also in that top group are omega-9 oil and canola oil. In fact, consumers have consistently ranked canola oil as one of the healthiest oils available from many, many different studies. I think what's also interesting to note is that down near the bottom are the oils that are the highest in saturated fats, oils like cottonseed oil and palm oil. So consumers are getting a much better comprehension of the difference of what exactly are healthy oils and what are the ones that aren't perceived as being very helpful. So these new oil innovations have been very helpful to the food industry. So if we look at the aspect of functionality, these oils don't have to be just a standalone use in terms of, say, a food service application, but these omega-9 type oils can also be blended in with hard stocks or with higher saturate type oils to give new functionality. They can help going into a shortening type of an application to reduce the saturate level and help maintain their structure. They can be used in those sorts of formulations where you can eliminate the addition of things like TBHQ and helping to clean up product labels. So they can fit well within existing formulations and and consistent processing environments. So we can maintain the functionality of a liquid oil. We can provide the heat stability that's required in those processes and maintain the shelf life through the good oxidative stability. And this has a benefit back onto the label slide. Labels are an important consideration for consumers when they take a look at making a food purchase decision. And by incorporating these new oils into these types of shortening systems or into those sorts of food applications, it will allow for cleaner labeling. It can allow for front-of-pack claims, i.e. around reduced saturates, and allow for cleaner labels, i.e. by removing trans fats, removing hydrogenation off the label, and also removing certain processing terms like interesterified oils, etc. Interesting work done recently by the Hudson Institute also shows that better-for-you products are also better for business. This is a great study done by Hank Cordello at the Hudson Institute just last year. And what they did in this study is they took a look at leading food companies and did an in-depth analysis of their product line, product sales, and financial results. And at the essence of what they found is that in the course of the last 5 years, is that the better-for-you products, and looking at these first two bars, the better-for-you products today may reflect about 38% of product sales, with conventional products being, say, 61% of product sales. But in terms of sales growth, the growth category really was in the better-for-you products. And we can see that although better-for-you products may be a lower part of the overall sales portfolio, they are the products that are driving the greatest percentage of sales growth. This also is translated into better margins. They took a look at the financial results, at the net results from better-for-you products. And what they found was that companies that had a higher percentage of better-for-you products in their portfolio delivered superior operating profits and operating profit growth. Again, in the first chart, we can see that the average operating profit margins for companies with higher better-for-you product portfolios were superior to those that did not have that, and also their margin growth was much higher as compared to companies who had a greater percentage of their product portfolio in the traditional food category. Healthier oils really do mean healthier business. These omega-9 oils that we've been reviewing today really help support companies on a variety of fronts. One, they fit in very well with the dietary guidance. If we look back at the last dietary guidelines, they call out specifically for consumers to take action on several fronts related to their oil consumption. They recommend consumers decrease the amount of saturated fat in their diet, that they remove the trans fats from their diet, and they incorporate more good fats into their eating. And so monounsaturates really do equal or deliver on better heart health. We also know that consumers like canola. Canola today is the most second widely consumed oil by the North American food industry. It's heart healthy, and it also is well perceived as being a North American crop. And we know that it's better for business. We've seen that healthier brands are more profitable, and they drive better and more positive brand perception by consumers. So thank you for your time today, and hopefully we've given a good perspective on the benefits of omega-9 oils. We're very excited and very proud of what we've been able to accomplish. We really have a new research-based, technology-driven kind of a solution in terms of being able to develop a new fatty acid profile through conventional plant breeding to deliver on cost-effectiveness, to deliver on health, to deliver on taste, and to also deliver on reliable supply. We've created a powerful network through our value chain that we can ensure that we can have reliable, cost-effective, broad-scale production that delivers product with great quality that really helps food companies deliver them on the needs for their applications in terms of healthier and better for you products. So thank you for your time today. And if you have any questions, please visit us at omega9oils.com.